Hey guys, welcome back to another graphic art tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make an animated GIF in Photopea.com with an object that has moving parts. So I've got an example of this on the Google Classroom. So here you can see the finished animation that I've been working on, and it is a golden snitch from the Harry Potter movie that is flying across the sky. So it seems pretty basic and pretty simple, but there is some complex ways that we go about creating this. So that's what I'm about to show you right now to break it down into easy to understand steps. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is open a new document on Google Classroom. And when I created this, I opened a new document. I chose the first template, which is the Facebook cover template. So I'm going to click on that, and that looks good to me. And I'm just naming it my name GIF. And if you want to add a secondary title that says or gives more detail as to what kind of subject you're going to be creating, you can add that to your name as well. After I created my document, I did some thinking about what kind of object I wanted to animate. So I knew I wanted to do a golden snitch. I knew I would have to have a gold shaped ball for the body of the snitch and some little wings for the flying part of the snitch. So I found these white angel kind of like wings on Google, and I removed the background from them. So they do not have any background. So that means that I can add whatever I want to the background and it will look like all one complete piece. So you guys should know how to remove backgrounds by now. You can use the pen tool to cut your objects out and delete the background. You can also use the magic wand tool for easy background removal if your background is all the same color, like a background that is all white or a background that's all black. So if you guys see kind of how I have this here, my golden ball for my snitch is on its own layer, and I'm going to go ahead and name that ball. So I'm keeping my layers nice and organized, and I have each wing on its own layer as well. I'm going to go ahead and name those so I can make sure I know exactly what is on each layer. We will be creating a lot of layers for this, so it's really good to be organized right from the start. Eventually, I'm going to be adding in my background, which is going to be this sky, but I'm going to keep that turned off for right now because I won't need it until I'm done animating my movement of my snitch here. But I will go ahead and name the layer so I know that it's there. I'm also going to keep this background just so I have something to kind of start from. It's currently locked, so it's not going to go anywhere, not going to do anything, but I'm going to leave that background there just so I have it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these three layers, the ball and the two wings, and I'm going to put them into a folder. So if you look down here at the bottom of your screen under your layers, next to your new layer button is the new folder button. And when you click on that, it creates a little folder. And when I created it, because I had clicked on this wing layer, it went ahead and put that wing in, I think, below the folder. Right. So this folder is currently empty and it's in between my two wings. And I can open and close the folder by clicking on this little button. If it's pointing sideways at the folder, it's closed. But if it's pointing down, it's open and you'll see everything that you put inside of it. So to add things to the folder, I can simply click and drag and put them over the top. And that will put any layer that I click and drag into that folder. So I'm dragging all of my shapes into it. So now when I click on that little arrow to open it, I can see these three shapes are all grouped together inside of the folder. I can even add a name to the folder and name it Snitch. And I'm going to name it Snitch 1 because I'm going to be making a couple of copies of this folder. So I have a couple of different snitches. All right. So now my layers that make up my snitch are all inside of that folder. There is another way you can do this. It's a little bit faster. So I'm going to undo everything that I just did to show you an easier way. And I'm just going to click on my first piece and I'm holding down my shift button and I'm going to click on my last wing piece and that's going to select all of my layers. I know that all of my layers are selected because they're highlighted. They are a slightly lighter gray color here than my other layers. So that can tell me that they're all selected. While I have them all selected, I can even move them all together as if they were all one layer. So that's a good way to, move multiple layers all at once. Now that I have them all selected, I can go back and I can click that new folder button again, and that's going to automatically put all of those layers into that folder. So if I click on that arrow, I'll see that all of my layers are now in that folder. I'll go ahead and rename that. So when I created a new folder, I lost that name. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the name for this folder of pieces for my snitch. All right. So now I'm going to resize my snitch because I need it to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of those layers. So I'm resizing the whole thing all at once, just so it's a little bit smaller so I can fit it on my screen. So to make the pattern to create my snitch in a way that appears like it's flapping its wings, like it's flying in this example right here, I'm going to need to recreate the snitch and these pieces that compose it a couple of times using different positions of the wings to make it look like it's flapping. So because I've already made all my pieces, it's going to be really easy to duplicate these pieces to create my next wing position. So to do that, I'm just going to close my folder so all of my pieces go inside of it. I'm going to add my animation code to this folder. Remember that when you want to create an animated GIF and add movement to something, you need to add this code. So it's underscore, you hold down the shift button and you hold down the little underscore button next to your 0 on the keypad. And that gives you the underscore symbol, lowercase a, and then another underscore. Anytime we add this code to any of our layers, it creates an animation when we go to export this file as a GIF. And I found recently that if you add the code to a folder, it will automatically work the same way as if you added it to each individual layer. So that's going to make our process a lot easier. So now that I've created this animation code and I've got all my pieces inside the folder, all I need to do now to make a second snitch is right-click and duplicate that layer. And that's going to duplicate that whole folder. And now I've got a copy. All right. I'm going to rename this so it doesn't say copy, so it says snitch 2. So I know that I have one snitch on one folder and then another one on this folder. I can open that folder up and I can see that there's a copy of all of my pieces that make up my snitch. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that all those are selected by using the shift button, holding it down, clicking on my first layer, and then clicking on my last layer to select all of the layers at once. Now I can use my move tool to move this copy of my snitch down. So you'll see that first copy up there, and now you'll see the second one that I've got selected down here. What I can do now is I can select each one of the wings and I can reposition the wings. And this is how I'm going to make my snitch look like it's flapping its wings and actually flying. So I'm not only moving it down slightly, I'm moving each wing as well to give it that motion, that flapping wings motion. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and close that folder. And now I can click on my folder and I can right click and I can duplicate that folder again and create a third copy. I'm going to go ahead and rename it. So it says snitch 3. All right. Use my move tool, open that folder up, and I'm going to select all 3 of those layers so I can move them all at once and pull that copy down. So now the snitch is going to be traveling downward, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the wings a little bit more and make them even lower. And this is going to really make my snitch look like it's flapping its wings when we export this as a GIF. So there's lots of different ways that you can show motion on whatever object or subject you're creating. Adding wings is a really great one. You just need to make sure that whatever you're moving is on its own layer, because that's what makes you able to reposition whatever it is to give it that sense of movement. If you were going to do a person with arms and legs, you would want each arm and each leg to be on its own layer, so that way you could move them individually. If you wanted to show car with moving wheels, you'd want each of the wheel to be on its own layer so you could reposition and move them independently. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process. I'll go ahead and close this folder. And I'm going to make one more copy, duplicate that layer. I'm going to rename this Snitch 4. And I'm going to open my folder, select my different pieces, use my move tool to move those pieces. There's my next copy. And I'm going to move it just slightly this way. And I'm going to move the wings individually and just make them even farther down. Okay. Obviously, the more copies that you make with different positions, the more the movement's going to look more realistic. But I think if you keep it to 3 or 4 different positions, that will be good enough to give you that sense of motion. All right, that looks good. I'm thinking we're going to go ahead and select this whole thing again, select my layers, and I'm just going to move this just a little bit farther down. So it's going to go off screen, but that's okay. It's going to come back up in just a minute. So now I've got my 4 different wing positions. I could continue to recreate each one and reposition them, but what I think I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to make a copy of each one of these 3 that I previously made and move them to the next part in my sequence. So I want the wings to start coming back up now. So I'm going to go ahead and find my folder with this one that has the next kind of upward facing wings. And that is my 3rd one. I'm going to duplicate it. So now I have a copy of that 3rd one. And I'm going to move that to the top of my list of layers. And I'm going to rename that Snitch 5. I'm going to go ahead and pull that copy, select all those pieces, and I'm going to move that copy over here to make it look like my stitch is starting to fly upward. All right, and now I'm just going to make copies of my next couple of positions and reposition them to show this snitch coming down and then flying back up across my screen. So the next one I want is this one right here with the wings kind of at the center. So that's my snitch number 2. I'm going to right click, duplicate that layer. I'm going to bring that layer all the way to the top of my list, rename it Snitch 6. Select those layers all at once and move that copy to the next position I want my snitch flying in. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and find my very first snitch with the wings that are facing upward. I'm going to right click and duplicate that layer, bring that layer up to the top, rename it. This is going to be my 7th snitch. I'm going to use my move tool, select all of those layers all at once, move that copy over here. All right. And I think I'm going to go ahead and make one more copy. I'm going to copy this one right here, duplicate the layer. I'm going to move it up over here. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and I'm going to move those wings and make this slightly higher with the wing position, just to give it a little bit of a difference. Okay, like it's flying away. It's going a little bit off screen, so I'm not going to be able to see all the details. But I think one more little change in movement will look good. All right, so now I've got my snitch flying across the screen, and it kind of looks a little bit like a jumbled mess because I've got so many copies. But of course, when we go to export this as a GIF, we know that we'll get that sequence moving the way we want it. I'm going to turn my sky on so I have my finished look. And that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to go over to export my GIF. File, export as, GIF, and now I can see my preview. You might get a message saying that your animation is very large and to scale it down to about 25%. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK when it says that. And I'm going to see my finished animation. And there it is. It looks beautiful. And I can see it looks really good with those wings kind of flapping up and down. I can adjust the speed, make it a little bit faster or a little bit slower depending on how I want it to look. And I can even mess around. I can reverse it and have it go in the opposite direction when I hit reverse frames. Or I can click on boomerang and that will create a loop sequence. And that's going to look kind of like it's bouncing back and forth. I like that. So I'm going to keep that way. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and that's going to download this animation as a GIF. So it seems like a complex process at first, but it all comes down to just staying really organized. So it's really good to learn how to use the folder option on Photopea and Photoshop to keep all your layers nice and organized. So that way, all you're really doing is making duplications and then moving and adjusting them as needed. Have fun with this. I can't wait to see what kinds of moving objects you guys come up with.